So, welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes, their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this morning, I'm delighted to have with us Sarah Beaumont, who's Partnerships and Marketing Director at With Signs. So, firstly, Sarah, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, With Signs, what you do, how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Lovely. Thanks, Chris. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on. So With Signs has been around for quite a long time. We were established in 1888, so
Now,
very long-standing business, founded in Bradford, now based in Leeds and St Helens. And we specialize in signage. So we help big brands, hotels, stadiums, anybody who's looking to elevate their physical presence to tell their customers and their users who they are, where they are, help them navigate around and really have a big brand impact. So we design and manufacture signage on site. We do everything by hand. We've got some amazing craftspeople here across the two sites, and they've really opened my eyes to what goes into creating this kind of stuff. I think I probably believed before I came into signage a lot of this stuff was mass produced and
yes,
probably all the same. And actually, I think due to the nature of a lot of these environments, particularly in the retail space, everything's different. Every store is different. So there's a lot of attention to detail got to go into making these brands look great and perform for a long period of time and do the job. So
brilliant.
it's been a really interesting few months getting my head around things here. And they work with some really good brands. And we've got a really, privileged position, I think, to be able to work in some great spaces, which is exciting.
Brilliant, brilliant. And what would you say makes a great client for you? Who do you serve best? Is there any particular type or sector, or just type of client?
Yeah, I think the type of client, Chris, for us, we work across a whole range of sectors. And I think the clients that we work best with are the ones that really want to bring us into the fold and get us involved at those early stages. So I
Yes,
think because the team here have got so many ideas about how to do things, not only from a quality perspective, but from a, brand consistency and sustainability perspective as well, the earlier we can get involved with the designers and the architects, the better job we can do for them ultimately.
brilliant,
And I
brilliant.
think it's nice to be able to be a true brand custodian and really help these retailers who sometimes are creating signage across not just multiple locations in the UK, but across Europe and beyond as well. And it's quite hard to make
Yes.
that work and still get that same impact wherever you are. So yeah.
And I think you said earlier, everything's handmade, and there's a lot of expertise and knowledge, isn't it? So the sooner people come and talk to
Yes.
you about what they might be thinking, the sooner you can talk about, I
Hmm.
guess, materials,
Yeah.
dimensions, all the things that's your specialism.
For sure, yeah. I mean, there's a huge amount of variables in doing this kind of stuff. You've got the external factors of the weather, you've got
Yes,
power controls, particularly with sustainability now and all of the big commitments that every large brand is having to make.
yes,
Even the utilization of the LEDs and how long they perform for is a really critical factor. So we're supporting with those kind of things. And like you say, getting involved at the latter stages, it's much harder to be able to influence those
yes,
things. So we
yeah,
like to be in the early conversations. And actually, a lot of the clients that we work with, we've worked with for, decades.
yes.
So, when they come to it, generally they're going to stay and work with them for a really long period of time. And I think it's nice in business to be able to know you've got somebody you can pick the phone up to that
Yes.
will just do the job intuitively and know what it is that you need. And it saves them a lot of time and it
Yeah.
works really well.
That makes perfect sense. So, Sarah, if we sort of look backwards a little bit, and if you talk a little bit about your background, how you got into business, and how you came to this particular business.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've kind of gone full circle in a way in manufacturing. I started life in a company called Bezier in Wakefield. Sadly, it's not there anymore, but I was 18, I think, when I started there.
Goodness.
Didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Didn't know what I wanted to do at uni, and I figured, you know what, I'll start work, I'll be able to pay my board, and I'll figure it out as I go along. And I started working on the point of sale account for Asda, and really just started doing production job bags. But I found really quickly that I absolutely loved figuring out what made people tick, not only in manufacturing internally, but with the client as well. And I really enjoyed understanding the why behind things. We were
Yeah.
getting briefs to just print things that were going into store and they might have been communicating price or product or, campaign themes. And I was just genuinely fascinated by
Mm.
how these things influence consumer behavior and how they get planned at head office level. And I went from just being an account executive to within, I think it was about 3.5 years, leading both the production team and the client-facing team in head office in Leeds as well. So quite a big team
Yep.
and quite a young leader,
Yes.
which I'm sure, a lot of people will share the challenges that go with that when you're suddenly
Yeah.
responsible for people that are a lot more experienced and a lot older than
Yes.
you are as well at a young age without any training. So yeah, that was fun. Um, but I found I loved working with people. I loved working with clients. I loved figuring out how to match up the right service with what it is they actually needed. And that wasn't always the thing they briefed. It was
Yep.
sometimes it was getting into the skin of what was needed. And I spent I think it was about 6, 7 years at Bezier before I got kind of itchy feet and wanted to see what else there was in the world. And from that point, I moved into um, outsourcing randomly. I've been in, digital and creative agencies. I've worked in global procurement and a lot of different businesses. And my roles have always really been about partnerships and about
Right.
connecting people, solutions, processes.
Yes.
Um, and I've had a really lucky journey, I guess, in terms of having exposure to a lot of different clients and sectors.
Yes.
And it goes by in a blink, doesn't it? You think back, it's like I'm not going to say how many more years above 20, but a few. Um, and yeah, it's amazing, really. It's a real rich background, and I think it's really given me a chance to understand how processes fit with the bigger picture
Yes.
strategies that we get from clients. So
What specifically brought you to with signs?
So I had a bit of a journey last year. So I was made redundant, unfortunately, in the spring of last year
Right.
from ADM, where I'd spent a couple of years, which was a great, again, another global procurement business, very, very huge global business. They were going through some restructuring and some right sizing, and my role was not needed, sadly. So I had a few months of resting a little bit, spending a bit of time with family, got
Great.
myself a gig as a extra or a essay, I think they call them, on a movie being filmed here in the north of England
Oh,
over the
brilliant.
summer, which was great. And again, just, passion of storytelling and getting to know
Yes.
different people. And it was nice to get a few months of downtime to figure out where my strengths were and what it is I wanted to spend time on. And I think one thing I'd really missed was seeing the outcome of a process,
Yes.
seeing something physical being made, and also being part of a business that had full autonomy, that was able to look at what was important for a client and make that stuff happen. And I think that's
Great.
much harder to do in a very, very large organization.
Yes.
And I had some, conversations over the latter part of the summer with Gary Williams, our MD, and he was looking for someone who's been in much bigger businesses and
Yes.
worked with big brands to be able to come in and help them to just keep on top of how they wanted to evolve as a business,
Yep.
be able to show up in the marketplace the way they wanted to, and be able to just get a lot of external experience and knowledge into the business. And so we set a bit of a plan, created a new role. It was very new to the business. There's not really been a dedicated marketing function
Right.
in Wid previously,
Yep.
simply because a lot of the work has continued to flow through referral, and that is still the case. But we want to be able to keep offering more
Yeah.
value to our clients, and that involves having, a deliberate team of people that are here to listen to the client and develop new solutions that will support them on their journey. So that was September when I joined. So yeah, it felt like a short time, but actually we're not going to be far off 12 months
No.
now.
No.
So
As you say, time goes so quickly, doesn't it?
it really does. It really does, yeah.
So when you were growing up, is this what you foresaw? I guess you said you didn't really have a plan, but were there other things
No.
that you planned for your life?
It's interesting. I think when I was at school, I did a lot of my studies were in art, graphic design, textiles. I was always quite creative, quite tactile, and I
Yep.
have gotten back into that as a hobby in the last few years. So I do a little bit more creative pursuits, let's call them, at home, which I really enjoy. But I think it's interesting that I ended up throughout my career in environments where it was quite creative. And I think
Yep.
more of that has become creative thinking than physical outputs. Although I'm now back in manufacturing, I knew I always wanted to be in some kind of a position which would allow me to translate things, I think. I love solving problems. I love being able to dig underneath the stuff that,
Yep.
at surface level you think you know what the answer is, but actually I'm the person that pulls things out from under the rug, which people don't always want to see.
Yes.
I'm quite passionate about diagnosing things and often understanding the question behind the question. And I think that really drove me at school, and it certainly has driven me throughout my career as well. So
Brilliant.
yeah.
And looking at the challenges throughout your career, what are some of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome, would you say?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think probably one of the main things, I guess, is probably quite common. I hear a lot of people say is it imposter syndrome. I think
Yes.
particularly because I was a leader very young
Yes.
and went through a lot of the training and coaching and development that happened later in my career, I guess.
Yep.
You build up confidence over time and through experience, but certainly in those early years, that was a massive challenge for me because
Yep.
I was, presenting to senior members of the client side. I was having to do, pitches and plans to boards in my own business at quite an early stage in my career, and that is definitely something that I struggled with. But
Yep.
I was, very lucky to get support from mentors, from my own coach I've worked with for a number of years, and that did make a big difference, definitely.
Brilliant. I think Stephen Bartlett, the entrepreneur's got a great saying about imposter syndrome. He says he loves imposter syndrome because it means he's in the right room and he's going to learn something.
I
So
love that. I've heard him say that same quote, and I do agree with that. I think I'm a big advocate for getting out of your comfort zone. That's
yes,
generally when I have been prompted to move sectors or move roles because I like to learn. I think every day is a
yes,
school day, and I think you've got to keep growing, keep challenging. And I think, if you're I think it's a phrase that I hear a lot in my home life with my children that do martial arts is if you're beating everyone in the room, you're in the wrong room.
yeah,
You've really got to keep being in spaces where people are going to challenge you and push you.
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. And what did you say your biggest learnings are about business in general?
I think one of my biggest learnings is not to make assumptions. I
Yes,
think in every situation we find ourselves in, whether it is getting a client brief, whether it is responding to a tender, it's too easy just to respond to what is written there. And I think
yeah,
it's incredibly important to understand why that brief has come across, what the
yes,
context is, what's needed. And I think that's definitely been true for me. And it's been a
yes,
big help, I think, in every interaction I've had, particularly with clients to understand what's driving that decision, to help them not only to get the right result and the right outcome and a great experience, but to become a really embedded, trusted partner. I think it shows you've got a commitment and an interest in what they're doing. And sometimes that's not just necessary for them making a decision, but for them pitching that decision internally as well, which
yeah,
can quite often be a big part of the battle, particularly in big brands and corporate businesses.
yes. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've interviewed quite a few people on this podcast now,
Mm,
and the things that a lot of successful people talk about is imposter syndrome. I would guess probably more than 50% of people would talk about imposter syndrome, but also that idea of curiosity. I think is that, as you say, being curious
mm,
is a real trait of
yeah,
success because
yeah.
because I often talk is a big part of what we perceive to be fact is actually belief. And if we act on that, then nothing changes. So the curiosity to continually learn, continually change, it's really, really
Mm,
key. And
yeah.
mentioned earlier about having mentors and coaches. Who would you say the most useful coaches you've had, whether that's business, sport, life in general, who has had the biggest impact on you?
Oh, so many. So
Brilliant.
many, Chris. I mean, I'm huge advocate for coaching in all guises. I grew up listening to Jim Rohn. My dad
Wonderful.
was a huge Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins fan. So
Great.
from before I can remember, I've listened to what was then his audio cassettes and his,
Yes.
VHS, videos of Tony Robbins, and I've attended not in live seminars with Tony Robbins yet, but it's on my bucket list. I have done virtual ones over lockdown.
Brilliant.
And they've had a profound impact on me, I think, throughout my life, particularly when it comes to mastering my own mindset,
Yes.
understanding my own mindset,
Yep.
learning strategies and techniques to grow. And I think, there's definitely not a week goes by when I'm not referencing some material of one of those two. But I think, I've worked with an amazing coach, Amanda Alexander, for, oh gosh, I've probably known her now for definitely over 10 years. And I started working with her when I first returned to work after having my son.
Yep.
And that was an extremely difficult period of adjustment because, it's like going back to a new job as a new human, and there's a lot of things to navigate. And she was running a coaching program called it was Coaching Mums, I think was the group that I joined. And at that
Brilliant.
time, it was a way of accessing coaching with other people as a peer group. And it completely transformed my experience and my career, really. I think I'd listened to a lot of the practices and the skills and the techniques and approaches through people like Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins. But I think being in a situation where someone is actively coaching you as an individual and
Yes.
really stepping back and thinking about challenges differently
Yes.
was really powerful. And I've continued to be coached by Amanda for many years, and we've grown very close. And I was at her wedding in Italy last summer, so I
Brilliant.
think it just becomes a big part of your life, doesn't it? And I think Amanda, one of the key things that always resonates with me, and I tell people all the time that Amanda taught me is that awareness is the precursor to choice, and that is one of the first things that she taught me, and one of the things she keeps reminding me of
Yes.
is that there's always going to be challenges that we face in life, in work, but if you have enough awareness of what is going on in your mind, in your body, in your energy, you can do something about it. But I think there's still quite a lot of people that get overtaken by the stress and the pressures and the
Yes.
the plot twists that happen in life that we let those, we run away with them a little bit sometimes.
Absolutely. No, as you say, you can't solve a problem that we're not aware of. So it's so key to have that
Absolutely.
constant. And I guess going back to
Yeah.
your point about curiosity is understand that, digging deep to really understand the issues to make sure that
Mm.
we're solving the right problem. If it,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. And in a work context, I think that's incredibly important because it's not just going to be work problems. We work with humans, and I've
yes,
led teams of very different sizes, and quite often the problem in the room isn't the KPI or the report, it's something else that's going on with that human being. And I think
yes,
I'm pleased to see that, coaching is becoming much more of a way of life for many more businesses. And I think it's more readily acknowledged as something to invest in now than it was
yes,
certainly when I was paying for my own coaching 10 years ago for
yep,
my career, because it's just such a fundamental
yeah,
part of how we develop. And I think particularly in a world that's now evolving quickly in terms of AI and technological
yep.
advances, I think tapping into the human potential is even more critical than it's ever been in my book.
100%. I think it's understanding and have that emotional intelligence that AI is going to do a whole bunch of really effective things. But I think that the thing it will struggle to do, well, for a certain for a period, is that human
Yeah.
interaction. It isn't human. Therefore, yeah. So building our skills and being aware of those sorts of things so key.
Mm.
And
Yeah, no, I think so.
yeah, no, brilliant. And whether it's from your coaches or from people like Jim or Tony, have you got any favourite quotes or sayings about life, about success that you catch yourself using on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think the main one that springs to mind, and I will probably get this wrong because I always do when I paraphrase it, but I think it was Jim Rohn that said that the major value in life is not what you get. The major value in life is what you become. And I think there's various different trainings and speeches he did where he brought that idea to life. But I think that's what it's all about for me, whether it's a goal in my life or it's a target at work or it's a new initiative. I'm always trying to figure out how it's gonna stretch me, how it's gonna
Yes,
make me a better leader, a stronger person. It's gonna give me an opportunity to stretch myself a little bit. So I think that's something I'm trying to teach my children as well, and trying to get into to their mindset that, don't set the goal for
yes,
for the money you're trying to earn or the position you're trying to achieve. It's who is that going to make you? What's that going to
you
give you
become.
as a result of achieving it?
I know.
Yeah, I love that.
Our founder Brad Triggers is a massive Jim Rohn fan. In fact, I'm pretty
Cool.
sure he was able to actually. He saw him speak many years ago,
Amazing.
and I think he's probably his favourite quote that he uses quite a lot. That we use is, and it echoes of what you've just said, which is never wish life is easier, but wish we were better.
I love that.
And I think that's really interesting. Who do we need to be? What do we need to do for ourselves to make it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And again, whether it's Jim or Tony or anyone else, do you have any favorite books or podcasts that you listen to on a regular basis that you can recommend?
I love Simon Sinek's Optimism podcast. I think it's just, I mean, I love Simon Sinek anyway.
Brilliant.
I've been listening to him for years,
Yep.
and I think it's nice because it genuinely introduces a bit of optimism, a bit of looking at something positively, and I think it helps to keep our brains wired for the good stuff in life as well. There's a lot of, I think the challenge sometimes we've really been focused on growth and development is that I think quite often it highlights the things that you're not yet. It highlights the
Yes.
things that you want to improve on and evolve. And I think that can create sometimes a little bit of a mindset of lack or being behind somehow. And I think it's nice to be able to counteract that a little bit. So I love listening to his content as well. And I think I do go back to Jim Rohn's collection on a
Yep.
regular basis, but I love Brene Brown as well. I listen to a lot of Brene Brown and Mel Robbins. I love her podcast too.
Yes.
I think again, I love the human aspect of it. I think those things are so powerful.
Yep.
Particularly Brene Brown's works around vulnerability and courage, I think is incredibly relevant, particularly in today's world.
I 100. Yeah, I think it's absolutely bang on. And as you say, accepting our own vulnerability and being open about, and talking about things
Mm,
like imposter syndrome. It's
yeah,
once we get it out there, it becomes something that we can deal with. Um,
yeah.
wonderful. And following on learning, what would you say you've learned about yourself so far on your journey, Sarah?
Oh, what have I learned about myself? I think probably one of the key things I've learned is that I'm far more resilient than what I have ever given myself credit for. I think particularly the last 5 years,
Yep.
I've gone through a lot of roller coasters in my career, in job changes, redundancy. I, I donated a kidney to my husband 4 years ago,
Oh my goodness.
um, which was a roller coaster.
Yes.
He is thankfully healthy and happy and settled now, but his kidneys failed towards the end of 2020. So
Goodness.
amongst all of the lockdown carnage and all of
Oh
that
my
disruption,
goodness.
we had a little bit of a journey as a family as well. And I think going through that alongside working full time and caring for two children and all of this, um, it yeah really made me realize that actually I'm quite tough. And
Yeah.
there's not a lot life can't throw at me without, and I not just keep going because I think it's a relatively unhealthy way of coping, but I think because I'd learned so much and I'd got so many strategies and so much, I suppose, mindset work, it really helped me to be able to process things that were really tough, incredibly difficult and required a lot of me personally,
Yep.
but in a way that meant that I could genuinely take the lessons from it and reflect on it and, kind of, it gives you a lot of perspective. Of course it does, but I think
Yes.
yeah, it gives you a bit of reaffirmation that, you've got strengths and superpowers that you didn't know you had, even if
Yeah.
it costs you a body part.
Wow. That must have been that must have been quite an experience. Probably doesn't say it well enough, but
Yeah, no, it definitely was. But again, it opens your eyes to a whole different part of the world that you
yes.
would never normally see,
Yes.
and so I think, that understanding of how many people struggle with things like that and, the challenges that there are when it comes to organ donation. It just
Yep.
gave me a whole other aspect of life I didn't know, and it really rallied us together as a family,
Yeah.
and the friends that we had around us at the time. And so I think that again reminds you that you've always got a support network out there. You've just got to put your hand up sometimes and
Yes.
ask. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is another key lesson, right?
Yeah. Yes, I couldn't agree more.
Mm,
There's always people out there to help us, aren't there? Uh,
yeah.
and so looking forward a little bit, what does the future look like for you guys? And what are the main challenges that you might face, if any?
I think the key focus for us really is remaining future proof, as a business. The
Yep.
business is, 137 years old now.
Yes.
We've gone through lots of different evolutions and challenges within the economy. And I think, because we're so straightforward as a business and we focus on what needs to be done and we focus on getting the job right first time, I think we're really equipped to ride out whatever the next 137 years
Brilliant.
bring. But I think what's fantastic is the business recognizes that, it's great to bring in external support. It's great to learn from clients. We engage with our clients regularly as well to make sure
Yep.
whatever we're developing as a service is relevant, is based on what's important to them and
Yep.
continuing to evolve. So I think being agile, particularly as an SME, is incredibly
Yes.
important.
Yep.
So, we're expanding our services, we're making sure that we're, reacting to market conditions, but also staying true to what's important to us, which is, quality and service. And I think that there's quite often a lot of pressure just to reduce pricing or to try and be lean. And I think there's always a trade-off, particularly when it comes to a service like ours, where that product could be up for many, many years. And we've got a job to do in terms of maintaining that brand integrity of the
Yep.
signage that we're making and putting out into the world. So I think that there's a lot of pressure to compromise on that. And I think what we're doing incredibly well is holding fast in terms
Great.
of what's the right thing to do for the client and what's the right thing to do for the business. So I think
Mm.
holding firm to that in the months and years to come is going to be key. And
Yeah.
we're working on, how we show up in the world and working on some exciting new stuff in the background, which hopefully we can put out into the world in the not too distant future, which will help to bring us into the future a little bit more.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And I'm keen to know what you'd say to anyone that was thinking of going into business right now.
Into any business right now.
Yeah, are you thinking,
Mm,
yeah, going into any
yeah,
business really, what would be the
just going
key
into the world,
advice that
into the
you'd
business.
give?
Um, I think probably I would say play to your strengths and play to your passions. I
Great.
think I think that is incredibly important because
Yes.
business is hard.
Yes.
Whichever type of business you're in, there are going to be challenges. There's
Yeah.
going to be pressures. There's going to be stress. And I think if you have a clear purpose and that's linked to something that really lights you up every day, it makes it so much easier to push through, to be resilient and to learn. I think that's incredibly important. I think again, it ties back to the who you will become and the why behind things, doesn't it? That if you go into business for just the paycheck or just the title, I think those things can be really short-lived in terms of
Yes.
motivation. And you see people reach the, dizzy heights of success. And if it was based on those things as opposed to a purpose and who they want to be, those people sometimes go a little bit sideways. So I
Yeah.
think that's the advice I would give.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I guess going back to Simon Sinek and his book Start With Why,
Absolutely.
I think that's very relevant. And I love the
Mm.
quote from, I think it was Stephen Covey, who will love it, when he said, "There's no point climbing the ladder of success to find you put it up against the wrong wall."
I love that. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just love it because it is, as you rightly say, quite often, and we find this quite a lot in ourselves, but people we work with is the success people are chasing is what they perceive
Mm.
they should be chasing, or what they perceive other people would want them to achieve, rather than just what do you really want?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
does success really look like?
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
and once
Yeah.
people get closer to that, it because, as you rightly say, it becomes so much easier to find that route forward. I think you mentioned, finding your
Mm.
superpowers. I think you mentioned earlier, and it
Yeah.
absolutely, what's a superpower? What if we enhance that to a level that we were really serving so many people effectively? And I think the truth for most people is we what we're really good at, we really like, and what we like, we're really good at, and it's just like it becomes so simple to focus
Mm.
on just doing the good stuff that we really enjoy and we really we're really good at. Um,
Yeah. No, I love that, and I think you hit the nail on the head with simple. I think that is
Yes.
we overcomplicate things so much in business, particularly in larger business, in my experience, and I think that's what we're doing incredibly well here. And we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with one of our long-standing clients. They were giving us feedback on our new website that we've developing, and the we got some really lovely feedback from him because he said, actually, you know what, the website feels like you guys do in that I'm reading this content. It feels like I'm just sitting at the other side of a table having a coffee and somebody's kind of guiding me through a journey and asking what it is I'm looking for. And that was absolutely what we were looking to achieve. And it was so nice to hear because our business is we're very human. We're straightforward. We want, we don't want, we don't want to have too many bells and whistles and make it overcomplicated.
Yes.
We're just talking to humans that need a thing and, we'll make that thing happen. And I
Yep.
think it's really important to keep our eyes on that because
Yeah.
it's very easy to get caught up in the complexity of messaging and yeah.
It's interesting. So we primarily, or certainly Action Coach was started primarily working with SME, often owner managed businesses, that sort of play. But
Mm,
we've also become quite effective executive coaching, which is lots of similar principles, but different. And one thing I've seen being in larger businesses is quite often the simple stuff that works that we work with when businesses are smaller people people have often forgot those
mm,
simple things, and actually just bringing them back to the simple stuff has
yeah.
transformed really large businesses through the executives we work with, and that's been really fascinating because you sort of assume to get to a certain size you're getting better and better at these things, but often we forgot why we started in the first place.
Yeah, it's so key, isn't it? I think I read the other day this often gets misquoted as being I think it was Einstein, but apparently the quote wasn't his, but something along the lines of if you can't explain it to a 7-year-old, you don't understand it. Um, and I love that quote because I think there's so much you read on, LinkedIn and in the press and all these places where people are trying to be clever with messaging. And quite often, I'm not sure these people understand what they're communicating or what they're selling. And I think that's always my litmus test, given that I have a 7-year-old, is could I explain it to my daughter and would
Absolutely.
she understand it? And just bringing it right back to something super, super simple.
Absolutely. That
Yeah.
we were lucky enough to spend some time with a guy called Donald Miller, who's the author of a number of books on branding and marketing, including the business. I always get this wrong. The business brand storybook, a way of
Ah, okay.
building brand. And he was over in the States, and we actually interviewed him for our national podcast while we were over there, and he talked about the simplicity of. Um, he was referring back to the 2016 US elections, I think. Obviously, there's lots of things going on in the States at the moment we're particularly talking about, but he
Mm.
talked about the two Republican potential nominees. One was a guy called Jeb Bush, who was one from the Bush family, and the other guy, and he said Jeb was so intellectual and was so passionate about how he wanted to take the country forward if he was to get the nomination and win as president that he wrote a book. So he wrote a sort of 500-page book on how to make,
Yeah.
and he said, and the other guy just had two phrases: was build a wall and make America great again. And in terms of the message being the simple
Yeah.
message being the one that was most successful, because he said most Americans don't want to read 500 pages to find out what what
No.
what this guy's about, and it's fascinating. I won't comment any
Yeah.
past that, but
No,
really,
that's
really
probably a good idea.
absolutely. But I mean, and the fact that
Mm.
whatever he did, wherever he was interviewed, he would always say those phrases multiple
Mm.
times and
Yeah.
just get a simple message across, which is going back to simplicity. In fact, Donald had so much impact on our UK chairman and Action Coach. We actually changed our strapline
Oh, great.
to make it more simple. We used to have
Yeah.
the strapline we've had for many years, which is because being in business should give us more life. I think that's right. I think it's but Donald just said, look, people you work with will get that, but people you don't,
Mm.
and we've changed it to be purely all the help you need to grow your business because that's it.
Brilliant. Yeah. Yeah.
It's telling people what's on the tin. It's
Mm.
rather than so yeah, no, that simplicity of message is so key, and going back to our roots and going back to,
Mm.
well, how have we been successful and what are the messages people have always grown up with us with, I think is so
Yeah.
key.
And it helps us to stay authentic, doesn't it, as well? It's much easier than trying to be overcomplicated based on what everybody else is doing.
Absolutely.
It's much easier.
I
Yeah.
suppose, yeah, I suppose thinking about it, you're not an imposter if you're just totally true to yourself. It's
No,
which,
no, that's very true.
yeah, which is really interesting. And
Yeah.
final question, Sarah, for you: what would be the
Mm.
best advice you could give an 18-year-old you if you were able to go back in time and do that?
18-year-old me, gosh. I have a phrase on my wall in my office at home that I wish she knew about at 18, which is, this is your world, shape it or someone else will. I've got no idea who actually coined that phrase or whose quote it was, but when I was redecorating my home office when I was based from home a couple of years ago, I saw it online and I thought that is what I need in my space. So I
Wonderful,
think it just for me embodies that idea of, look, this is your life, your path. Figure out what it is you want and take control of it, because if
brilliant,
you don't write that script, you will fall into somebody else's story. And I think, I'm a massive story geek. I love reading. I'm constantly immersed in some kind of universe. And I think for me, it's been the main story of your own life, being the protagonist in your own story as opposed to being a side character in somebody else's. I think that's what
brilliant.
I would tell
Love it. Love that. I think that's the sound advice for us all. Uh,
her.
Sarah, it's been really fascinating talking to you, and there's lots of learning in everything we've discussed. So thank you so much for your time. And for anyone watching that would like to get in touch with you or with Signs, or be interested in what how you could help them, what would be the best way to do that?
So they can contact me at hello@widsigns.co.uk, or they can visit our current website, which is www.widsigns.co.uk.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you,
Well,
Chris.
Sarah, it'd be great to swim by another 6 to 12 months just to see how things are developing for you and for With Signs. But for now, thank you so much for your time.
Been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.